This is HOA Karma Files. The stop work notice hit before the first board was set. Karen shouted that my fence blocked a sight line and she would call it a safety hazard to force a faster penalty. You signed the covenants, now you live them. She was already waving a laminated policy sheet in my face when I stepped out of my truck, and I could see the red stamped final notice envelope in her other hand. It was a Tuesday morning in Denver, Colorado, and I had exactly 10 days before the Beacon Hill Homeowners Association threatened to escalate this into collections language that could hit my credit. My name is on the mortgage, I work as an HVAC dispatcher who records every call and ticket, and I need to be able to park my work vehicle on my own property without dealing with this nonsense. The fence was 4 feet high, black steel panels, professionally installed 2 months earlier, and it sat exactly where the contractor said it should, based on the property corners. Catherine Thompson, board secretary for Beacon Hill, did not care about any of that. She stood on the driveway apron in a purple blazer with the hood up because the sky was threatening a storm, a lanyard with a blank HOA badge swinging as she gestured. She had chin-length black hair in a bob with a side part, and her voice carried across the cul-de-sac. "My fence is not blocking anything," I said. She cut me off. "A neighbor filed a complaint. The boundary is different than you think. You are over the line." I asked her to show me the complaint. She said it was confidential. I asked her to show me the survey or plat map she was using. She said the HOA does not need to provide that. "I can make this a lean conversation in one email," she said. "Keep talking, I love adding notes." She pulled out her phone and started typing while I was still standing there. The first drops of rain started hitting the driveway, and I saw a security guard hovering near the clubhouse door about 50 yards away, watching the whole thing. I told Catherine I would get my own survey if she insisted the line was wrong. She smiled. "Good. You will see I am right, and then you will have to remove it at your own expense." She turned and walked back toward the clubhouse, and the guard moved aside to let her in. I stood there in the rain for another minute, looking at my fence and thinking about the fact that my work depends on parking a service van in my driveway, and the HOA had already sent one notice threatening to tow it if I did not resolve the fence issue first. That van has my tools, my company laptop, my service tickets for the next 2 days. If it gets towed, I miss calls, I lose money, and my boss starts asking questions. I went inside and pulled the file folder I keep for HOA correspondence. I have been documenting everything since the day I moved in, because this neighborhood is the kind of place where a missing survey stake turns into a neighborhood scandal. Beacon Hill is one of those developments where every mailbox looks the same, every lawn has the same height requirement, and every violation gets a laminated policy sheet and a red-stamped final notice envelope within a week. I knew Catherine ran the paperwork, so I knew she could bury me in process if I gave her the chance. I called a surveyor that afternoon. He said he could come out in 3 days and it would cost me $800. I said fine, send the estimate and I will pay up front. I also called my neighbor 2 doors down, a woman named Vanessa, who works as a renter advocate and knows how to file complaints with the city when landlords or HOAs overstep. I told her what Catherine said about the boundary. Vanessa laughed. She is bluffing. Nobody complains about a fence that low unless they are trying to cause trouble. But if she is claiming the HOA has proof, make her produce it in writing. I said I already asked. She said ask again, and this time CC the entire board. I drafted an email that night. I kept it short and polite. I noted the date of the confrontation, the claim that the fence was over the line, and the threat about collections language. I asked for the survey or plat map the HOA was referencing, the name of the neighbor who filed the complaint, and the specific covenant section I was violating. I CC'd all 7 board members and the property management company. I hit send at 9:14 p.m. and went to bed. The next morning, I got a reply from Catherine at 6:47 a.m. She did not answer any of my questions. She said the board would discuss the matter at the next meeting, which was 2 weeks away, and that I should consider retaining an attorney if I intended to dispute the finding. No survey, no neighbor name, no covenant reference, just a passive-aggressive suggestion that I lawyer up. I forwarded the email to Vanessa. She replied within 10 minutes. That is not how enforcement works. If they have proof, They have to share it when you ask. If they do not, this is harassment. I did not argue, because I already had something in my pocket she did not know about. Before I even installed the fence, I had asked the city zoning office about setback rules for corner lots, and they sent me a PDF with the requirements. My fence was compliant. I also had the contractor receipt showing he used the property pins marked by the previous owner, and I had photos of those pins with timestamps. I was not going to drop all of that in an email. I was going to wait until Catherine pushed hard enough that she could not back out, and then I was going to let her walk into it. The surveyor came out on Friday. He spent 2 hours with a tripod and a laser measure, and when he was done, he handed me a printed report on the tailgate of his truck. Your fence is fine. It is 18 inches inside your property line on the north side, 3 feet inside on the west side. Whoever told you it was over the line is either guessing or lying. I asked him to put that in writing with his license number and signature. He said he already did, and he pointed to the report. I paid him the balance and thanked him. I made 3 copies that afternoon. 1 for me, 1 for Vanessa, 1 for the board meeting. Catherine did not wait 2 weeks. She showed up at my house the following Monday with a tape measure and a clipboard. She knocked on my door at 7:30 a.m. and said she was conducting a compliance inspection. I asked her if she had scheduled it. She said HOA officers do not need to schedule inspections. I stepped outside and closed the door behind me. She walked straight to the fence line and started measuring from the sidewalk to the nearest post. I followed her with my phone recording. She did not notice at first, or she did not care. She measured 3 spots, wrote numbers on her clipboard, and then stood up and said the fence was 6 inches over the property line and would need to be relocated or removed within 30 days. I asked her what she was measuring from. She said the sidewalk. I said the sidewalk is not the property line. She said it is the easement line and the covenant language treats them the same. I pulled out my phone and opened the zoning PDF. I read her the section about setbacks for corner lots. She said that is city code, not HOA rules, and the covenants are more restrictive. I asked her to show me the covenant section. She said she did not have it with her, but she would email it. She never emailed it. Instead, I got a certified letter 3 days later. The letter said I was in violation of Section 4.7 of the covenants, which governs fence height and placement, and that I had 30 days to bring the property into compliance or face a fine of $100 per day starting on day 31. The letter included a photocopy of a covenant page, but the page was cut off at the bottom so I could not see the full text of Section 4.7. I took a photo of the letter and sent it to Vanessa. She said that is not a legal notice. That is a scare tactic. Go to the county clerk and get the full recorded covenants. They cannot edit them. I drove to the county clerk's office that afternoon. I paid $12 for a certified copy of the Beacon Hill covenants, all 43 pages. I sat in my truck in the parking lot and flipped to Section 4.7. It said fences must be no more than 6 feet high in rear yards and 4 feet high in side yards, and they must be set back at least 12 inches from the property line unless otherwise approved by the board. My fence was 4 feet high and 18 inches inside the line. I was compliant. There was no language about easements or sidewalks. Catherine had made it up. I made 4 copies of Section 4.7. I highlighted the relevant sentences. I put 1 copy in my glove box, 1 in my work bag, 1 in the folder at home, and 1 in an envelope addressed to the board president. I mailed it that night with a short cover letter. I wrote that I had obtained a professional survey confirming my fence was compliant, that I had reviewed the recorded covenants and found no violation, and that I was requesting an immediate retraction of the 30-day notice and the threat of fines. I kept it polite. I did not accuse Catherine of lying. I just said the facts do not support the claim. The board president, a retired accountant named Gerald, called me 2 days later. He sounded uncomfortable. He said he had received my letter and reviewed the survey report, and he agreed the fence appeared to be compliant. However, he said, Catherine had raised concerns about the sightline at the corner, and the board wanted to have an independent review before closing the matter. I asked him what that meant. He said they would hire their own surveyor and compare the results. I asked who was paying for that. He said the HOA would cover it if the results confirmed my survey, but if the results showed a violation, I would be responsible for reimbursement. I said that is not how this works. If you are claiming I am in violation, you need to prove it before you fine me. He said he would bring it to the board. The next board meeting was on a Thursday night at 7:00 p.m. in the clubhouse community room. I arrived at 6:50 with Vanessa, the survey report, the covenant pages, and a printed timeline of every email and letter I had received. I also had my phone charged and ready to record. The room had about 20 folding chairs set up in rows, a long table at the front for the board, and a lectern with a microphone for residents who wanted to speak. Catherine was already seated at the board table, wearing a white blazer and the same lanyard with the blank badge. She was typing on a laptop and did not look up when I walked in. Gerald called the meeting to order at 7003. There were about 12 residents in the room, most of them older couples who looked like they attended every meeting. Catherine read the minutes from the previous meeting in a flat monotone. Then Gerald moved to new business and said there was a compliance matter involving a fence installation that required board discussion. He looked at me and asked if I wanted to speak. I stood up and walked to the lectern. I said I would like to present evidence that my fence is compliant and request that the violation notice be rescinded. Catherine interrupted before I could continue. She said the board had not yet completed its review and it was premature to present evidence. Gerald told her to let me finish. I laid out the survey report on the lectern and read the key sentence. The fence is 18 inches inside the property line on the north side, 3 feet inside on the west side. I held up the covenant page and read section 4.7. I said my fence meets every requirement. I asked the board to explain what violation they were alleging. Catherine said the survey was paid for by me and could not be considered impartial. Gerald asked her if the HOA had obtained its own survey. She said not yet, but they were in the process. Vanessa stood up from her seat and asked to speak. Gerald nodded. She said that under Colorado law, an HOA cannot fine a homeowner without providing written notice of the specific violation and an opportunity to cure. She said the notice I received did not cite the correct covenant section and did not include any evidence of a boundary error. She said if the board proceeded with fines without proof, it could be considered harassment, and the homeowner would have grounds for a complaint with the state. Catherine's face went red. She said Vanessa was not a lawyer and should not be giving legal advice. Vanessa said she was not giving advice, she was stating facts, and anyone in the room could look up the statute. Gerald tried to regain control. He said the board would table the matter until they had their own survey, and in the meantime, no fines would be assessed. Catherine started to argue, but Gerald cut her off. He said that was his decision as president and the vote was not needed because it was a procedural delay. Catherine closed her laptop hard enough that the sound echoed. She said fine, but she wanted it noted in the minutes that the homeowner was being given preferential treatment. Gerald said it would be noted that the board was exercising due diligence. The meeting moved on to a discussion about landscaping bids, and I sat back down. After the meeting, Catherine walked past me on her way out and stopped. She leaned in close and said, "This is not over." I said, "I know." She said, "Keep talking, I love adding notes." Then she walked out into the parking lot. Vanessa waited until Catherine was gone and then said, "You need to get ahead of this." She is going to try to escalate before the board can stop her. I said I am ready. Vanessa said I hope so, because she is not going to play fair. The next morning, I got an email from the property management company. It said that effective immediately, my access to the community pool, gym, and clubhouse was suspended pending resolution of the open violation. I called the management company and asked who authorized the suspension. The woman on the phone said it was a board decision. I said the board president told me no action would be taken until the survey was complete. She said she was just following the instructions she received from the board secretary. I asked her to send me the written authorization. She said she would check with her supervisor. I never got the authorization. Instead, I got a call from Gerald that afternoon. He sounded angry. He said he had just found out about the amenity suspension and he did not approve it. He said Catherine had sent the email to the management company without consulting him or the rest of the board. He said he was going to reverse it immediately, and he was going to have a conversation with Catherine about overstepping her authority. I thanked him. He said he was sorry this had gotten so messy, and he hoped we could resolve it quickly. I said I appreciated that, but I needed the board to understand that I was not going to accept any fines or penalties when I had proof of compliance. He said he understood. 2 days later, a truck from a survey company pulled up in front of my house. 2 men got out with equipment and started setting up on the corner near my fence. I went outside and introduced myself. They said they were hired by the HOA to verify the property line. I asked if they had a copy of my survey report to compare. They said no, they were doing an independent measurement. I said that is fine, just make sure you use the recorded plat and the existing property pins. They said they would. I stood on my porch and watched them work for about an hour. They took measurements, marked points with flags, and then packed up and left. One of them handed me a business card and said the report would be sent to the HOA within a week. I did not hear anything for 10 days. Then I got a call from Gerald. He said the HOA survey was complete, and it matched mine. The fence was inside the property line and compliant with the covenants. He said the board was going to vote at the next meeting to formally close the matter and rescind the violation notice. He said he was also going to propose a policy change to require board approval before any officer could suspend amenities or threaten fines. I said that sounded reasonable. He said he wanted to apologize for how this had been handled, and he hoped I would consider staying involved in the community. I said I would think about it. The next board meeting was 3 weeks later. I showed up with Vanessa again, and this time there were about 30 residents in the room. Word had gotten around that there was drama, and people wanted to watch. Catherine was at the board table, but she looked tense. Gerald called the meeting to order and immediately moved to close the fence violation matter. He read a short statement. The board has reviewed 2 independent surveys and the recorded covenants. Both surveys confirm that the fence in question is compliant. The violation notice, dated October 14th, is hereby rescinded. No fines will be assessed. The homeowner is entitled to reimbursement for reasonable costs incurred in responding to the notice. Catherine did not say anything. Gerald asked if there were any objections. No one spoke. He called for a vote. 6 board members voted yes. Catherine abstained. Gerald said the matter is closed. Then he moved to the policy proposal. He read the draft language about requiring board approval for amenity suspensions and fine threats. Catherine finally spoke up. She said the policy would make it impossible for officers to enforce violations in a timely manner. Gerald said that was not true. It just required collaboration. Catherine said collaboration was not efficient. Vanessa raised her hand and asked to speak. Gerald nodded. Vanessa said the current system allowed a single officer to weaponize access and fines without accountability, and that was exactly what had happened in this case. She said the homeowner had been threatened with collections, amenity suspension, and daily fines despite having proof of compliance from the beginning. She said the policy change was necessary to protect residents from abuse. Catherine said that was a personal attack and she demanded an apology. Vanessa said it was not personal, it was factual, and if Catherine felt attacked, maybe she should reflect on her actions. The room went silent. Gerald said the board would take a 10-minute recess. When the meeting resumed, Gerald said the board had discussed the matter and decided to move forward with the policy vote. The vote was 5 in favor, 1 opposed room, 1 abstained. The policy passed. Then Gerald said there was one more item. He said the board had received a complaint from a resident about officer conduct, specifically regarding unauthorized communications with the property management company and misrepresentation of board decisions. He said the board had reviewed the complaint and determined that the secretary position required a change in leadership to restore trust. He said Catherine would remain on the board as a member, but she was being removed as secretary effective immediately. The board would elect a new secretary at the next meeting. Catherine stood up. She said this was a witch hunt and she had done nothing wrong. Gerald said the decision was final and the vote had already been taken in executive session. Catherine said she wanted to see the complaint. Gerald said it was confidential personnel matter. Catherine said that is convenient. She grabbed her laptop and her bag and walked out. The room stayed quiet until the door closed behind her. Then, someone in the back started clapping, and a few others joined in. Gerald banged the gavel and said that was enough, and the meeting moved on to budget items. I stayed until the end. Vanessa and I walked out together, and she said that went better than I expected. I said I was surprised Gerald moved that fast. She said he probably got pressure from other board members. Once the surveys came back, Catherine had no defense, and the amenity suspension made her look vindictive. I said I still wanted my reimbursement. Vanessa said bring receipts to the next meeting and make it a formal request. I said I would. If you are enjoying this story, hit that like button and subscribe for more HOA revenge tales where the paperwork wins. I submitted the reimbursement request 2 weeks later. I included the surveyor invoice, the county clerk fee, the certified mailing costs, and 6 hours of lost work time at my hourly rate. The total came to $1,043. I attached a cover letter explaining each line item and referencing the board resolution that entitled me to reasonable costs. I sent it certified mail to the HOA and CC'd the property management company. Gerald called me 3 days later. He said the board had reviewed the request and approved it in full. The check would be mailed within 10 business days. He also said the board had decided to terminate the contract with the property management company that had processed the amenity suspension without authorization. He said they were moving to a new company that had better controls and required board sign-off for enforcement actions. I said that was good to hear. He said he hoped this was the end of the drama. I said I hope so too. The check arrived 8 days later. I deposited it and sent a thank you email to Gerald. I thought that was the end. It was not. 3 weeks later, I came home from work and found a notice taped to my front door. It was from the City Code Enforcement Office. It said a complaint had been filed about an unpermitted fence installation, and I needed to provide proof of a building permit within 14 days, or face a fine. I called the Code Enforcement Office and asked who filed the complaint. They said it was anonymous. I asked if the complaint included any evidence. They said no, just a claim that the fence was installed without a permit. I explained that the fence was under 4 feet and did not require a permit under City Code. The woman on the phone said she would note that, but I still needed to respond in writing with documentation. I knew it was Catherine. I called Vanessa and told her. She said file a harassment complaint with the HOA and the police. I said the HOA already dealt with her. Vanessa said file it anyway, because this is escalation and you need a record. I said I would. I drafted a response to code enforcement that night. I included a copy of the city zoning code showing that fences under 4 feet do not require permits, a copy of my survey showing the fence was compliant, and a copy of the contractor invoice showing the installation date and specs. I mailed it certified and kept a copy. The Code Enforcement Office closed the complaint a week later. They sent me a letter saying no violation was found and no further action was required. I made copies and added it to my file. Then I drafted a formal harassment complaint and mailed it to the HOA board and the new property management company. I described the timeline, the amenity suspension, the false violation notice, and now the anonymous code enforcement complaint. I said the pattern was clear and I was requesting that the board take action to prevent further retaliation. I did not name Catherine in the complaint, but I said the timing and tactics matched the previous conduct of the former board secretary. Gerald called me 2 days later. He said the board had received my complaint and they were taking it seriously. He said they had also received similar complaints from 2 other residents about Catherine's conduct in unrelated matters. He said the board was going to hold a special meeting to discuss whether Catherine should be removed from the board entirely. I asked if I would be notified of the outcome. He said yes, and he would also make sure the new management company flagged my account to prevent any further unauthorized actions. The special meeting happened on a Tuesday night. I did not attend. Vanessa went and texted me updates. The board voted 4-2 to remove Catherine from the board for conduct unbecoming of a member. Catherine argued that she was being targeted for enforcing the rules. One of the other board members said she was being removed for harassing residents and filing false complaints. Catherine said she would sue. The board said that was her right. Catherine walked out. Vanessa called me after the meeting. She said Catherine looked destroyed. I said I almost felt bad. Vanessa said do not. She tried to ruin you over a fence, and she did not stop even after she lost. I said I know. Vanessa said watch your back for a few months, because people like that do not let go easily. I said I would. Catherine did not let go. 2 weeks later, I got served with a small claims court filing. She was suing me personally for defamation, claiming I had made false statements about her in my harassment complaint and caused her removal from the board. The filing demanded $5,000 in damages. I read it twice and then called Vanessa. She said get a lawyer. I said it is small claims, I can represent myself. She said not for this. If she is this mad, she is going to fight dirty, and you need someone who knows the rules. I hired a lawyer the next day. He was a solo practitioner who handled HOA disputes and landlord-tenant cases. His name was Mark, and he had been practicing for 20 years. I gave him the entire file, every email, every notice, every survey, every complaint. He read through it in one sitting and said this is frivolous. You did not defame her. You documented her actions and reported them to the board. That is protected. He said he would file a motion to dismiss and countersue for attorney fees if she did not drop it. Mark filed the motion 2 weeks later. Catherine opposed it. The hearing was set for a Friday morning at 9:00 a.m. I took the day off work and met Mark at the courthouse. Catherine showed up with a binder full of printed emails and a timeline she had made herself. She did not have a lawyer. The judge was a middle-aged man who looked tired. He asked Catherine to explain her claim. She said I had lied about her in my complaint to the board and caused her to be removed. The judge asked her what statements were false. She said I claimed she filed an anonymous code enforcement complaint, but I had no proof. The judge asked if she filed the complaint. She said no. The judge asked if anyone else had a motive. Catherine said that was speculation. Mark stood up and said we had a pattern of conduct. He walked the judge through the timeline. The false violation notice, the amenity suspension, the misrepresentation of the covenants, the anonymous complaint that came 3 weeks after she was removed as secretary. He said the timing alone was circumstantial evidence, and more importantly, my complaint to the board did not name Catherine. It described conduct and requested action. The board made the decision to remove her based on multiple complaints, not just mine. He said there was no defamation because I did not publish any false statement of fact. The judge asked Catherine if she had any evidence that I made a false statement. She said I implied she filed the code enforcement complaint. The judge said implication is not defamation. He asked if I explicitly accused her in writing. Catherine said no, but it was obvious. The judge said obvious is not the legal standard. He dismissed the case and awarded me attorney fees in the amount of $1,200. Catherine said she would appeal. The judge said that was her right, but he was not optimistic about her chances. We walked out of the courtroom, and Mark said congratulations. I said I just want this to be over. He said it probably is. People who file frivolous suits usually do not follow through on appeals once they lose. I said I hoped he was right. He said send me the bill for your survey and any other costs you did not get reimbursed for, and I will add them to the fee petition. I said I already got reimbursed by the HOA. He said good, then this is closed. Catherine never appealed. I got a check for the attorney fees 6 weeks later. I added it to the reimbursement from the HOA and decided I was done thinking about fences and covenants for a while. Vanessa texted me a few times to check in. She said Catherine had moved out of Beacon Hill about 2 months after the court case. Nobody knew where she went. I said good riddance. Vanessa said the new board was a lot calmer, and they had hired a management company that actually followed the rules. I said that was good to hear. But the story was not quite over, because about 4 months after Catherine moved out, I got a call from a man who said he was an attorney representing a gate vendor company that had a service contract with Beacon Hill. He said the company had discovered that someone had been manipulating the access control system to lock out specific residents as retaliation, and they had traced the activity to login credentials assigned to the former board secretary. He said the vendor was terminating the contract with the HOA and filing a complaint with the state contractor licensing board because the abuse violated the terms of service and created liability. He said he was calling me because my name appeared in the access logs as one of the residents who had been locked out. He asked if I wanted to provide a statement. I said yes. I told him about the amenity suspension and the timeline. He said that matched the logs. He said the vendor had no idea the lockouts were happening until a routine audit flagged unusual activity. He said Catherine had used her board credentials to manually disable access for 3 residents over a 6-month period, and all 3 had been involved in disputes with her. He said the vendor was considering a civil suit against Catherine personally for misuse of the system. I said I was not interested in suing her again, but I was happy to provide a statement if it helped. He said he would send a form and I could fill it out at my convenience. I filled out the form that night. I described the suspension, the lack of authorization, and the fact that Gerald had reversed it as soon as he found out. I signed it and mailed it back. 2 weeks later, I got a letter from the vendor's attorney. It said the vendor had terminated the contract with Beacon Hill and filed a formal complaint with the state. It also said Catherine had been contacted and chose not to respond. The letter thanked me for my cooperation and said the matter was closed from my perspective. Vanessa called me the next day. She had heard about the vendor situation from someone on the board. She said the HOA was scrambling to find a new access control company, and the whole thing had become a mess because Catherine's conduct had poisoned the relationship. She said the new board president had sent an apology letter to every resident who had been locked out, and they were offering a 1-month credit on HOA dues as compensation. I said that was something, at least. Vanessa said it was more than something. It was proof that when people abuse power, eventually it catches up with them. I got the dues credit the following month. I also got a handwritten note from Gerald. It said he was stepping down as board president at the end of his term, and he wanted to thank me for being patient during a difficult time. He said he was sorry the situation had escalated the way it did, and he hoped I would consider running for the board in the next election. I appreciated the note, but I had no interest in joining the board. I had seen enough of how it worked. The fence is still there. Black steel panels, 4 feet high, 18 inches inside the property line. It has been there for over a year now, and nobody has said a word about it. I park my work van in the driveway every night, and I use the pool and the gym when I feel like it. The neighborhood is quieter without Catherine. Vanessa says the new board is boring, which is exactly what an HOA board should be. But I still keep the file folder. Every email, every notice, every survey, every court document. I keep it in a banker's box in my closet, and I check it once in a while to make sure nothing is missing. Because I learned something from this whole mess. In a neighborhood where a missing survey stake turns into a scandal, the person with the best records wins. And I always keep records. I ran into the security guard from the clubhouse a few months later. He was working a shift at the pool gate, and he recognized me. He said he remembered the day Catherine yelled at me about the fence in the driveway. I said I remembered it too. He said he knew right then she was going to lose because she was so angry she could not think straight. I asked him what he meant. He said angry people make mistakes, and mistakes leave evidence. I said that was true. He said he had worked security for HOAs for 15 years, and he had seen the same pattern over and over. Someone gets a little bit of power, they use it to settle scores, and then they get caught because they do not know when to stop. I said Catherine definitely did not know when to stop. He said no, she did not, and that was why she was gone. The final piece of the story came almost a year later. I was at a neighborhood barbecue, and someone mentioned that Catherine had filed for bankruptcy. I did not ask for details, but Vanessa heard about it from a friend who worked in real estate. She said Catherine had racked up legal bills from multiple cases, not just mine, and the attorney fees had wiped her out. Vanessa said she also heard Catherine had been trying to sell her old house in Beacon Hill, but the market had slowed and she ended up taking a loss. I said that was rough. Vanessa said it was consequences. I said I guessed it was. I do not think about Catherine much anymore, but every time I walk past my fence, I think about the fact that she tried to force me to tear it down over a boundary line she never bothered to verify. She was so confident she was right that she threatened liens, filed complaints, locked me out of amenities, and even took me to court. And every step of the way, I had proof she was wrong. The survey, the covenants, the city code, the contractor invoice, the timeline, the emails. I had everything, and she had nothing but anger and authority she did not know how to use. The HOA reimbursed me for the survey. The court awarded me attorney fees. The vendor terminated the contract and filed a complaint. Catherine lost her position as secretary, then lost her seat on the board, then lost in court, then lost her house, then filed for bankruptcy. And my fence is still standing, exactly where it was always supposed to be. The board election happened in the spring. Vanessa ran for a seat and won. She called me the night of the vote and said she was going to make sure the new rules stuck and nobody ever pulled that kind of stunt again. I said good luck. She said she did not need luck. She had receipts. I laughed. She said seriously, thank you for fighting this. If you had not pushed back, Catherine would still be terrorizing people. I said I just wanted to park my van. She said yeah, but you did not roll over, and that mattered. I got one more piece of mail from the HOA about 6 months after the election. It was a survey asking residents to rate their satisfaction with board leadership and management services. I filled it out and gave high marks across the board. There was a comment box at the end asking if I had any suggestions for improvement. I wrote one sentence. Keep enforcing the rules fairly and do not let personal grudges drive decisions. I mailed it back and did not think about it again. But a few weeks later, Gerald called me one last time. He said he had read the survey results, and my comment had been noted in the board summary. He said the new president had asked him to pass along a message. The board wanted me to know that they had implemented a new review process for all violation notices, requiring 2 board members to sign off before any notice was sent. He said they had also added a mandatory appeal window and a requirement that the HOA provide evidence of any claimed violation within 10 days of a resident request. He said they were calling it the fairness policy. I said that sounded good. He said it would not have happened without my case. I thanked him. He said he hoped I was enjoying my fence. I said I was. The fence is still there. It will probably be there for another 20 years. And every time I look at it, I remember the moment Catherine stood in my driveway with a tape measure and a clipboard, shouting that I was over the line and threatening to make it a lean conversation in one email. I remember the red-stamped final notice envelope, the laminated policy sheet, the doorbell camera recording the whole thing. I remember Vanessa telling me to get ahead of it, and Mark telling me it was frivolous, and Gerald telling me he was sorry. But most of all, I remember the public meeting moment where the minutes turned against Karen. I remember standing at the lectern with my survey report and my covenant pages and my timeline, and I remember the room going silent when Vanessa said the policy change was necessary to protect residents from abuse. I remember Catherine's face going red, and Gerald calling the vote and the policy passing 5-1. I remember Catherine being removed as meeting chair and losing the microphone control, and I remember the HOA canceling the vendor relationship tied to the abuse. I remember Karen demanding proof, and then panicking when I handed out copies. That was the moment I knew I had won. Not when the board voted to close the violation, not when the court dismissed her lawsuit, not when the vendor filed the complaint. The moment I won was when I dropped the gate vendor service report proving the lockout was intentional configuration, not a glitch, and I said it in a calm 2-sentence statement, and then I let the silence do the damage. The room understood what had happened. Catherine had abused her access to punish me, and the vendor logs proved it. There was nothing she could say. I had not argued, because I already had something in my pocket she did not know about. I had kept every email, every timestamp, every notice. I had documented every confrontation, every threat, every escalation. I had built a case brick by brick, and when the time came, I slid a tab timeline to the board and the room at the same time, and it was over. The funny thing is, Catherine had all the power at the start. She was the board secretary. She controlled the paperwork. She could send notices, suspend amenities, threaten liens, file complaints. She had the rules on her side, or at least she thought she did. But she made one critical mistake. She never checked if she was right. She just assumed. And that assumption cost her everything. I went to the grocery store parking lot nearby a few months after the court case, and I saw Catherine attempting a public confrontation. She was loading groceries into her car, and she saw me walking toward the entrance. She stopped and stared. I nodded and kept walking. She called out my name. I turned around. She said, "You ruined my life." I said I defended my property. She said you could have just moved the fence. I said the fence was compliant. She said you made me look like a liar. I said you were a liar. She opened her mouth to respond, but nothing came out. She got in her car and drove away. That was the last time I saw her. Vanessa told me later that Catherine had tried to join the board of another HOA in a different neighborhood, but they ran a background check and found the vendor complaint and the court case. They rejected her application. She said Catherine had also tried to volunteer for a community group, but someone recognized her name and told the group about the Beacon Hill situation. Vanessa said she felt a little bad about that. I said I did not. Catherine had a chance to stop at every step. She could have checked the survey before sending the violation notice. She could have consulted the board before suspending my amenities. She could have dropped the issue after Gerald closed it. She could have not filed the code enforcement complaint. She could have not sued me. She chose escalation every single time, and escalation has consequences. The last thing I heard about Catherine was that she had moved out of state. I do not know where, and I do not care. The fence is still standing. My work van is still parked in the driveway. I still have access to the pool and the gym. The HOA still sends me a monthly statement, and I still pay my dues on time. The red-stamped final notice envelope is in the file folder in my closet, along with everything else. I do not look at it often, but I know it is there. And every time I drive into my neighborhood and I see the Beacon Hill Homeowners Association sign at the entrance, I think about the fact that an HOA is supposed to maintain property values and enforce reasonable rules. It is not supposed to be a weapon. It is not supposed to be a way for one person to settle scores or intimidate neighbors. And when it becomes that, the only way to stop it is with documentation, patience, and the willingness to fight back within the system. I fought back. I won. And now I have a fence that I will probably never think about again, except as a reminder that receipts matter, deadlines matter, and sometimes the person who keeps the best records is the person who walks away with everything. That is the whole story. A fence, a board secretary who did not know when to stop, and a year of paperwork that ended with me still standing in my driveway and Catherine gone from the neighborhood. The HOA is calmer now. The board follows the rules. The vendor relationship is professional. And my fence is exactly where it is supposed to be. Keep your sanity, and I will catch you next time.